type of thing. And
So explain Washington Poe for people who don't know.
Well, he is at the start of the series. He's a bit of a hermit, actually. He's living on Shatfell in this croft because he was a social pariah. The press were all over him because he was supposed to have killed a suspect. And this serial killer is burning people alive in the stone circles of Cumbria. And the third body, when they put it through this process, and they find something's been carved on his chest before he was burnt alive, and it's actually the name Washington Poe. So he's brought back from retirement to sort of work on this case. And because people think he's going to be the next victim, that's why his name was carved onto this guy's chest. So he's quite keen to solve the case before it happens. And he gets teamed up with this civilian analyst called Tilly Bradshaw, who has never been out of academia. She was taken out of school when she was 13 to go to Oxford and read pure mathematics. And they end up a sort of oddball couple. And they don't like each other to start with, but they're sort of very good friends now. And a lot of the there was a review in a magazine called The Quietus, which isn't something I'm familiar with. But
I know of it. Yeah,
they've got a huge,
yeah.
they're
Very
a huge
popular
thing, yeah. And they said it's the macabre, grisly, blood-soaked murders that draw you in, but it's the characters that you come back for.
Yeah,
and I think that's right. I think people are more interested. They're interested in what Poe and Tilly.
When I was reading Dead Ground, I was like, oh, there's history here that I need to go back.
Yeah, they can all be read as standalones. I mean,
but I didn't feel like I was missing out.
Yeah, you shouldn't be. I mean, they're written that way. Dead Ground was actually the hardest because something happened at the end of The Creator, which was horrific, and it sort of affected the team dynamics a little bit. But you should still read Dead Ground without actually sussing what happened.
I'm eventually going to go. I'm probably going to go backwards.
Sure, I said I would have bought you some. I would have bought you some
fine,
in because I mean I get copies thrown at me.
Yeah, but so have you been since the book came out? Have you been pretty much doing a press as much as you can?
There's been a fair bit of promotion. Ordinarily, we'd have a launch in Covent Garden because my agent owns a big bookshop there, and we'd have a Cumbrian launch, a big live thing.
Yeah,
that didn't happen this year because it happened just before the sort of unlocking, and we didn't go out to London for the same reason. So a lot of the events I did were online, and for the first time actually, I had events every night of the week, and some during the day, but I had nothing on publication day. So the first time I was able to go to the pub because usually I'm the soberest at my launches because I'm sort of being interviewed, so I stay sober for that. Then I'm signing books at the end when everyone's sort of throwing the beers down. So I sort of join everyone at 10 o'clock at night. I sort of wish I was in the audience watching myself so I could have a few beers.
Yeah, but so Washington Poe as a character, where'd you start? How many characters would you say you've created at that level?
In what way?
As in, because he's a very specific character, I guess, and people seem to be drawn to him.
Yeah, he's been on a bit of a journey. He was quite dark, and he could behave staggering overreactions, mainly violent, in the first book. He crushed somebody's hand while he was holding some glass, and he threatened to twist someone's fingers off, mainly because of Tilly. He was sort of standing up for Tilly. Now Tilly doesn't need standing up for, and he's mellowed a lot, so he's been a bit of a journey. So has Tilly, and there's some of the key characters that I've brought in the series gradually that are in Dead Ground. So like Estelle Doyle, the pathologist, the boss, D.I. Stephanie Flynn. She's not in Dead Ground as much because of something that happened in the previous book. So I've got a few characters. And in the first book, Fluke, Avison Fluke, he was my lead, and he's sort of he's the genesis of who Poe was. He sort of had I took the part because I didn't think anyone was ever going to read this series. I took the parts I liked, which was like someone living on, because Fluke lived in a cabin above Ullswater. So I took that isolated living, and I took the fact that he had a very strong friendship. It was with an ex-paratrooper in the Fluke series, but obviously it's Tilly in this series. So I was able to take the bits I like. And I shouldn't have, but I took a complete plot point from Burial Gown and used it in The Curator. And then Little Brown bought my Fluke series and released them the same year the creator was out. So I had to quickly rewrite the ending for Burial Gown because I had virtually identical endings.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I like creating characters, and I've always sort of come from the position that they've got to be able to stand on their own. That readers should, unless it's just somebody delivering a bit of paper or something. If they're on the page, if they're in the book for more than a page or so, they need to have a back. I need to sort of understand a bit about them. So there's a character called Bugger Rumble in Dead Ground, who's a sort of street. He's a homeless guy, but he's a street performer. And I wrote him, and as soon as I wrote him, I thought he's going to be a recurring character because he was so much fun to write. So I've just written him into Poe 6 as well for another. He's got a new act though this time. So
where's a lot of inspiration for your characters coming from?
Well, I mean, Bugger Rumble actually. He came. There was when I was going to the match in Newcastle. I was going to see Newcastle. We used to go to the Northumberland Arms before the game sometimes, which is a pub on near Eldon Square on Northumberland Street. And there was a basically a pisshead really, and he would draw a line on the ground with chalk, and you would pretend he was tight rope walking,
yeah. And
he would do wobbles and things, and at the end he would sort of bow, and he would wait until he had enough money, and then as soon as he had enough he would dive into Northumberland Arms for a pint. And I thought, well, that's good. And then just so when I was creating this character, I thought, well, I could just use that. And my mate had challenged me to get the phrase Bugger Rumbled into my next book, so I thought, well, Bugger Rumble, that's a great name, a great name. So I mean, sometimes it is something as stupid as that. Other times sometimes you just need a character to do a certain thing, so they behave a certain way anyway.
I'm assuming you've got a big notebook full of all these ideas for either characters or titles.
I just sort of remember it. So,
okay.
But if you asked me what colour someone's eyes were, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you what Poe's eyes, what colour they were. I was talking to Mark Billingham actually once, and he said that there are frequent arguments online about what colour Tom Thorne's eyes were. Mark Billingham was one of the biggest crime writers in the UK. Tom Thorne's one of the most famous characters. And he says, they might be right, they might be wrong. I've never actually said what colour his eyes are. So all these people are having arguments, saying, it was in book 6, he said grey, and book 7, he said blue, and all this type of thing. And he said, I've never described them. So
it's funny because the fans take it to a whole other...
They absolutely...
It lives on without you.
They own it. And, and sometimes they'll say, I miss Tilly and Poe, and I wonder what they're up to now. And I'm like, yeah, that's just weird. Because
they're in here. They live in there.
They're just bits of... I mean, they're basically squiggles on a bit of paper. And these squiggles somehow then translate into an actual picture in your mind.
Have these characters ever been drawn or brought to life in any way?
They got quite close. The TV deal, the first TV deal, that went all the way to the head guy at the BBC. In fact, if it hadn't been for COVID, it would have been.
I was going to ask, has any of your stuff been made for?
Yeah, I mean, they optioned it, then they re-optioned it, then they re-optioned it. So they had 3 options in total, but the COVID landscape changed. The COVID changed that commissioning landscape, so. They didn't. It'll get sold again. And I was at a big crime writing festival weekend before last, Harrogate. And I was approached by a TV guy there who's asked me to write a treatment. And then he had to explain what a treatment was because, I mean, it's a completely different discipline. Yeah. So he's told me, and I said I'll have a go.